Hello and welcome to the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program briefing. If you do not have your briefing packet in front of you, I would highly recommend that you go and get your packet and grab a pen and paper while you're at it, because more than likely you will have questions. Then feel free to call our office at the end and we will be happy to supply you with all the answers. Things you should know. Don't risk your chances for federally assisted housing by providing false, incomplete, or inaccurate information on your application forms. This is to inform you that there is certain information you must provide when applying for assisted housing. There are penalties that apply if you knowingly omit information or give false information. The United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, places a high priority on preventing fraud. If your application or recertification forms contain false or incomplete information, you may be evicted from your apartment or house, required to repay all overpaid rental assistance you received, fined up to $10,000, imprisoned for up to 5 years, and or prohibited from receiving future assistance. So let me just point out here where it says recertification forms, we will probably typically use the word reexamination. So during your reexamination period, which will happen once a year, we send out reexamination forms. Anything that has false information, very misleading, will fall under this criteria. We just ask that everyone be open and honest and communicate with us as best as possible. More than likely, we will find out the truth. All right, asking questions. When you meet with the person who is to fill out your application, you should know what is expected of you. If you do not understand something, ask for clarification. That person can answer your question or find out what the answer is. This goes for signing documents as well. Never, ever, ever sign something that you don't understand. Always ask for clarification. So let's move on to completing the application. When you answer application questions, you must include the following information. Income. All sources of money you or any member of your household receive, such as wages, welfare payments, alimony, Social Security, and pension. Any money you receive on behalf of your children, which includes child support, Social Security for children. Income from assets, such as interest from savings account, credit union or certificate of deposit, dividends from stock, earnings from a job or a part-time job, any anticipated income, such as a bonus or a pay raise you expect to receive. This also goes for cash contributions. Anybody who gives you cash, whether it's your mom, your grandma, an aunt and uncle. It can also be somebody who helps you out with your children with clothing, food, school supplies. That will have to be counted as cash contribution as well. Moving on to assets, you will have to give us asset information, all bank accounts, savings bonds, certificates of deposit, stocks, real estate that are owned by you, and any adult member of your family's household who will be living with you. This is if it exceeds $5,000. If it does not exceed $5,000, we will not include it, but if it does, we will include it. So that's why we ask for this information. Any business or asset you sold in the last 2 years for less than its full value, such as your home to your children. The names of all the people, adults and children, who will be actually living with you, whether or not they are related to you. Signing the application. Do not sign any forms unless you have read it, understand it, and are sure everything is complete and accurate. When you sign the application and certification forms, you are claiming that they are complete to the best of your knowledge and belief. You are committing fraud if you sign a form knowing that it contains false or misleading information. Information you give on your application will be verified by your housing agency. In addition, HUD may do computer matches of the income that you report with various federal, state, or private agencies to verify that is correct. Recertifications, also known as reexaminations. You must provide updated information at least once a year. Some programs require that you report any changes in income or family household composition immediately. So be sure to ask when you must recertify. You must report on recertification forms. So here's what you need to report. Again, all income changes, such as increases of pay and or benefits, change or loss of job and or benefits for all household members. Also report any move in or out of a household member, and report all assets that you or your household members own and any assets that was sold in the last 2 years for less than its full value. Beware of fraud. You should be aware of the following fraud schemes. Do not pay any money to file an application. Do not pay any money to move up on the waiting list. Do not pay for anything not covered by your lease. Get a receipt for money you pay, and get a written explanation if you're required to pay for anything other than rent, such as maintenance charges. Let me draw your attention up to that first one where it says do not pay any money to file an application. Some people get confused about this because they do go to an apartment complex, they fill out an application, all of a sudden there's an application fee. That money is for a background check. So definitely inquire with them and ask what that charge is for if you want to know if they have a fee. If it's something other than background check, you can bring it to our attention, but definitely don't pay. You don't have to pay money to file an application. Reporting abuse. If you are aware of anyone who has falsified an application, or if anyone tries to persuade you to make false statements, report them to the manager of your complex or your PHA. That's us. If that is not possible, then call the local HUD office or your HUD office of Inspector General. The hotline at 800-347-3735. You can also write to this street address below. All right, so these are just things that you should know. Hang on to that because you may want to refer back to that from time to time. Total tenant payment and rental payments. The total tenant payment, also known as TTP, represents the minimum amount a family must contribute toward rent and utilities regardless of the unit selected. The TTP is calculated using a formula that is applied to the tenant's income. The tenant pays the greater of 30% of monthly adjusted income, or 10% of monthly gross income, or $50 minimum rent for our program. The program regulations state that the tenant can pay up to 40% of adjusted monthly income for rent. However, the tenant should look at this option carefully to decide if this would be an unaffordable burden. The rent must also be rent reasonable. The tenant's gross income is adjusted with eligible deductions and allowances. Deductions include $480 per child per year and reasonable child care expenses for persons with children who are working or attending school. There is a $400 deduction for elderly, handicapped, or disabled tenants, and some deduction for out-of-pocket medical expenses for these tenants as well. If the tenant is responsible for paying utilities, an allowance is applied at the time the rent is calculated. The utility allowance is an average only and is not what the family actually consumes. The utility allowance is based on actual rates charged and is reviewed annually. Reasonable rents. The Section 8 voucher is issued for a specific bedroom size and is based on HUD occupancy standards. It is best to find a unit that is the same size as the voucher. So if you were issued a 2-bedroom voucher, it's best to find a 2-bedroom unit. Same goes if you were issued a 1-bedroom voucher, it's best to find a 1-bedroom unit. If the tenant chooses a unit smaller than the bedroom size on the voucher, the payment standard for the actual bedroom size is used. If the tenant chooses a unit larger than the bedroom size on the voucher, the payment standard for the bedroom size on the voucher is used. The voucher size also determines how much subsidy will be paid, including rent and utilities. The subsidy is called the payment standard. The rent and utilities for the unit you choose may not exceed the payment standard. The table below tells you the maximum rent that is allowed for each bedroom size for units in which the utilities are included in the rent and units for which the tenant is responsible for paying utilities. So as you see here, if you choose a one bedroom, let's say you're issued a one bedroom voucher and you go find a one bedroom unit, rent, that's all utilities included is $630. It's best to find a unit that has rent within the next amount you see on your graph here, which is $419 to $489. And the reason why is because you want to make sure that when it comes time for you to pay your utilities, it's going to be at or below that 630. So if you're having to pay utilities and the landlord does not include the utilities, we highly recommend that you use that second column, the 419 to 489. Looking for a unit. There are several factors to consider when looking for a unit. For a unit to qualify, it must 1, be located in Washington County, excluding Springdale city limits. 2, the owner must agree to participate in the Section 8 voucher program. 3, the owner may not be related to you, such as a parent, child, grandparent, grandchild, sister, or brother, unless the Housing Authority determines that it would be a reasonable accommodation for a tenant with disabilities. 4, the rent on the unit must be reasonable as shown in the table on the other page. In addition, the rent must be reasonable when compared to other units of similar size and amenities. The higher the rent, the higher quality the unit must be to qualify. 5, the unit must pass inspection. The Housing Authority has a list of owners who work with the program on a regular basis, which you may use. You can also search using the newspaper or other sources. Housing quality standards and inspections. When you find a unit, you and the landlord will complete paperwork included in your packet called a request for tenancy approval and submit it to our office. An inspection will be scheduled to determine if the unit meets housing quality standards. Your packet includes a list of inspection items. If the unit does not pass inspection, we will inform the owner and the tenant of the items that need repair. The owner can correct the items and another inspection will be done. The rental assistance cannot begin until the unit passes inspection. I want to add a little note here that you should never, ever, ever sign a lease or give deposits until that unit has completed and passed the inspection. All right, deposits. The tenant is responsible for paying security deposits, cleaning deposits, and utility deposits. The deposit charged by the owner should be the same deposit for a tenant who does not have rental assistance. So you also want to ask if the landlord can take payment installments for a deposit, if they're able to work with you in any way. So just feel free to ask the landlord if you can make installments. Lease and notice to vacate. A lease will be signed between you and the landlord will sign a contract with the Housing Authority. The initial term of the lease and contract is 1 year and is binding on the tenant and owner. This means that during the first year of the lease, you must obtain the written consent of the owner if you want to transfer to another unit. If you move without the owner's permission, you will not be eligible for further rental assistance through our office. After the initial year has expired, you may remain in the unit if the owner agrees. If you wish to transfer to another unit, you must give the owner and the Housing Authority a 30-day written notice. The lease is also binding the first year on the owner, and he or she can only end the lease for good cause, such as lease violations or transfer of the property ownership. If the landlord terminates the lease for violations, he or she must do so according to state and local laws. It is your responsibility to provide a copy of any eviction notice to the Housing Authority. Please be aware that receiving a termination or eviction notice could cause you to lose your rental assistance. After the initial year has expired, the owner may terminate the lease with a 30-day written notice to you and the Housing Authority. Visitors and family size changes. The unit you rent cannot be used for any purpose other than as a private dwelling solely for the tenant and their family. The tenant may not give accommodations to any roomers, lodgers, or other persons without the consent of the housing authority and the landlord. You may have visitors for up to 2 weeks or according to your lease. Please note that anyone visiting you must have their own place of residency or they will be considered as living with you. If you have a family member that you wish to move into your unit, you must report promptly to the housing authority and bring all necessary documentation to add them to your lease. You must also obtain written permission from the landlord, and the housing authority will determine whether or not to add them to your lease. You may not move anyone in until it has been approved by the housing authority and the landlord. Reporting changes. The tenant is responsible to report to the housing authority within 10 days of any and all of the following: overcharges made by the landlord, which is the rent cannot be increased during the first year of the lease; violation of housing quality standards; income changes; family size changes; asset changes; and deduction changes. If the tenant fails to report any of the changes in a timely manner, the housing authority can charge you back for rent paid out on your behalf in error and/or terminate assistance. Voucher extensions. The voucher is good for 60 days, but please note if you are on the VASH program, it is good for 120 days. If you are unable to find a unit within that time, you must submit a written request for an extension of time. The request must include the reasons you need an extension, such as an illness or other medical conditions, including hospitalization, or you are called away on family emergency. Other reasons may be that you have located a unit, but it won't be vacant until after the expiration date, or if the landlord needs more time to make repairs. In your written request for an extension, you should include the landlords and the properties that you have looked at in your initial search for a unit and reasons why these units did not work or you were not able to rent these particular units. Please be aware that if the program is full at the time of your request, we cannot extend your voucher. The best time to use it is in the original 60 days so that you don't chance losing your voucher. You will be notified in writing if an extension is granted. The voucher can be extended to a maximum of 120 days. Annual recertifications and inspection. And remember, when we say recertifications, we are talking about reexamination. So about 3 months before the end of the HAP contract, which is a year long, you will be contacted to begin the annual recertification and inspection process. The housing authority is required to recertify the tenant's income, family composition, and the TTP is recalculated. You will receive a written notice from the housing authority with an appointment time for the inspection. The notice will include a recertification questionnaire that you must complete and have ready at the appointment time. An adult member of the household must be present at the time of the inspection. If you have a conflict with the time scheduled for your inspection or recertification, it is your responsibility to call and reschedule the appointment time. If the unit does not pass inspection, the landlord will be notified and they'll have 30 days to take corrective action. The recertification also signals the end of the initial lease term. After initial term is over, the lease will be month to month, and you or the landlord may terminate the lease with a 30-day written notice. Family obligations. Please read the following forms carefully before signing your housing choice voucher. These are your obligations under the program. Basically meaning if you violate a family obligation, you could be at risk for losing your rental assistance through the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. Okay, so family information. The family must supply any information that the housing authority or HUD determines is necessary in the administration of the program. The family must supply any information requested by the housing authority or HUD for use in a regularly scheduled reexamination or interim reexamination of family income and composition. The family must disclose and verify social security numbers. All information supplied by the family must be true and complete. The family must supply information or certification requested by the housing authority to verify that the family is living in the unit under lease through the program. Inspection and damages. The family must allow the housing authority to inspect the unit at reasonable times and after reasonable notice. The family is responsible for HQS violations caused by the following. The family must pay for and keep current utilities that are not included in the rent. Utility shutoff is a violation of housing quality standards. The family must provide and maintain any appliances that the owner is not required to supply. The family is responsible for damages to the dwelling unit or premises that are caused by family members or guests except for normal wear and tear. If there is a violation of HQS caused by the family that is life-threatening, the family must correct the violation within no more than 24 hours. For other violations caused by the family or guests, the family must correct the violation within no more than 30 calendar days or any extension approved by the housing authority. Lease compliance. The family may not commit any serious or repeated violation of the lease. The family must not sublease or rent the unit to another person or persons. The family must not assign the lease or transfer the unit to another person or entity. The family must not own or have any interest in the unit. The family must use the assisted unit for residency by the family, and the unit must be the family's only residence. Notices. The family must notify the housing authority and the owner in writing 30 days prior to moving from the unit or terminating the lease. The family must promptly notify the housing authority of the birth, adoption, or court-awarded custody of a child. The family must promptly request housing authority approval to add any other family member as an occupant of the unit. The family must promptly notify the housing authority if any family member no longer resides in the unit. Assistance may be terminated or denied for the following reasons. If the members of the family engage in drug-related criminal activity or violent criminal activity. If the family or members of the family receive Section 8 voucher assistance while receiving another housing subsidy for the same unit or for a different unit under any federal, state, or local housing assistance program. If any member of the family has been evicted from public housing. If a housing authority has terminated assistance under the certificate or voucher program for any member of the family. If the family currently owes or other amounts to the housing authority or to another housing authority in connection with Section 8 or public housing assistance. If the family has not reimbursed any housing authority for amounts paid to an owner under a HAP contract for rent, damages to the unit, or other amounts owed by the family under the lease. If the family violates an agreement with a housing authority to pay amounts owed to a housing authority or amounts paid to an owner by a housing authority. The housing authority at its discretion may offer a family the opportunity to enter an agreement to pay amounts owed to a housing authority or amounts paid to an owner by a housing authority. The housing authority may prescribe the terms of the agreement. If a family participating in the FSS program fails to comply without good cause with the family's FSS contract of participation. If the family has engaged in or threatened abusive or violent behavior toward housing authority personnel. If members of the family commit fraud, bribery, or any other corrupt or criminal act in connection with the program. Explanation of portability. Portability in the HCV program refers to the process through which your family can transfer or port your rental assistance when you move to a location outside the jurisdiction of the public housing agency that first gave you the voucher when you were selected for the program. This voucher can be portable within our metropolitan statistical area, so Washington County, Crawford County, Sebastian County, Sequoyah County. This voucher can also be ported within the state of Arkansas and in the jurisdiction of a housing authority anywhere within the United States that is administering a tenant-based program. Your initial PHA will determine if you are eligible to move and will notify the PHA you are porting to. Things you should know. The PHA where you want to move may have different rules, policies, and deadlines. The PHA you are porting to may rescreen you using their own policies, which may differ from your initial PHA's policies and could result in them denying your request to move. The receiving PHA may have a different payment standard or utility allowance that could affect the amount of rent you pay. You may be issued a different voucher size from the PHA you are porting to. You must give your current landlord notice of your intent to vacate in accordance with your lease and your current PHA. You should manage the move so that you can have enough time to arrive at the receiving PHA before the initial PHA voucher expires. Otherwise, you may lose your assistance. New families that lease up must live in the jurisdiction of the initial PHA for at least 12 months before they may be able to port their rental assistance. The PHA will consider exceptions to this policy for purposes of reasonable accommodation or reasons related to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Please note, in order to be initially eligible for portability, you must be a resident of Washington County, excluding Springdale, at the time of your application. Okay, so additional adult certification and reporting interim changes. Very self-explanatory. Go ahead and read through each of these. Every adult member needs to sign it and return it to our office. If we have an adult signature that's missing, your packet will be incomplete. So please read over this. If you have any questions about it, don't hesitate to call our office and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Okay, so the next two forms that must be signed is Fayetteville Housing Authority's authorization for release of information. And then on the next one, it's HUD's authorization for release of information. On the back side is where you'll sign for HUD. But let's go back to our office for the Section 8 voucher program, why we need you to sign this. So this gives consent for us as your housing specialist to verify income or to verify utilities. As you see there where it says groups or individuals that may be asked. Now remember, this is some of the people we contact, but it's not limited to this. So we can go outside this scope. So for instance, people who report certain incomes, we can definitely verify those by contacting employers. We can contact the Veterans Administration, Social Security. We can even check your child support. We can call anybody on your behalf. So please sign this. Again, every adult member must sign it in order for it to be complete. If you move on to HUD's release of information, this has nothing to do with our office. It has to do with HUD. They require you to sign as well. Here on the back page, every adult member in the household has to sign it or it is not complete. This gives us access to the EIV, which is an income verification tool, and that puts you in the database, and therefore we can run income on you as well. But please feel free, go ahead and read through all of this and then sign and return to our office completed. Moving on to debts owed to public housing agencies and terminations. I will not read through all of this, but I do want you to take note that on the back side, you will have to sign, every adult member needs to sign. You should have multiple copies for each adult member. If you do not, please contact our office because every adult member needs their own copy to sign. So please do not crowd down here at the bottom and do multiple signatures. It's one signature per form. So let's go ahead. If you see where it says the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, I will just read these two paragraphs to you really quick, and then please go ahead and sign these forms and make sure you turn those in as well. All right, so HUD maintains a national repository of debts owed to public housing agencies or Section 8 landlords and adverse information of former participants who have voluntarily or involuntarily terminated participation in one of the above listed HUD rental assistance programs. This information is maintained within HUD's Enterprise Income Verification, which is the EIV system, which is used by public housing agencies and their management agents to verify employment and income information of program participants, as well as to reduce administrative and rental assistance payment errors. Moving on down, HUD requires PHAs, which administers the above listed rental housing programs, to report certain information at the conclusion of your participation in a HUD rental assistance program. This notice provides you with information on what information the PHA is required to provide HUD, who will have access to this information, how this information is used, and your rights. PHAs are required to provide this notice to all applicants and program participants, and you are required to acknowledge receipt of this notice by signing page 2. Each adult household member must sign this form. So as it says right there, sign page 2. Each adult household member must sign this form. So for multiple adults in the household, you must get more than one form per adult. What information about you and your tenancy does HUD collect from the PHA? The following information is collected about each member of your household, which is your family composition: full name, date of birth, and social security number. Please go ahead, like I said, read over this. If you have any questions, again, call our office. We can answer all of your questions and get this signed and turned into us. What you should know about EIV. I'm going to be skimming through this, so please remember to read this in its entirety, because on the back page it requires a signature, and I want to make sure that you know what you are signing. So in this first paragraph, I know it's kind of hard to see, but it says, what is EIV? And that's right under the title, what you should know about EIV. So what is EIV? The Enterprise Income Verification System is a web-based computer system that contains employment and income information of individuals who participate in HUD rental assistance programs. All public housing agencies are required to use HUD's EIV system. What is the EIV information used for? Well, primarily the information is used by PHAs and management agencies hired by PHAs for the following purposes: to confirm your name, date of birth, and social, to verify your reported income sources and amounts, to confirm your participation in only one HUD rental assistance program, to confirm if you owe an outstanding debt to any PHA, confirm any negative status if you moved out of a subsidized unit under the public housing or Section 8 program, and also follow up with you, other adult household members, or your listed emergency contact regarding deceased household members. EIV will alert your PHA if you or anyone in your household has used a false social security number, failed to report complete and accurate income information, or is receiving rental assistance at another address. Remember, you may receive rental assistance at only one home. EIV will also alert PHAs if you owe an outstanding debt to any PHA, and any negative status when you voluntarily or involuntarily move out of a subsidized unit under the public housing or Section 8 program. This information is used to determine your eligibility for rental assistance at the time of application. The information in EIV is also used by HUD and the Inspector General and auditors to ensure that your family and PHAs comply with HUD rules. Overall, the purpose of EIV is to identify and prevent fraud within HUD rental assistance programs. Moving on down to the next section, it says when you sign a form HUD 9886, I want you to pay attention here. This is talking about the release of authorization, the HUD release of authorization that you just went over. Authorization for release of information, the Privacy Act notice. If you look at the bottom of that page, it says Form HUD 9886. So this section is referring to that release of information that you signed for HUD. So note, if you or any adult household member refuses to sign a consent form, your request for initial or continued rental assistance may be denied. You may also be terminated from the HUD rental assistance program. So be sure to sign all forms, please. All right, if you want to turn the page over, remember you must notify your PHA if a household member passes away or moves out. You must also obtain the PHA's approval to allow additional family members or friends to move in your home prior to them moving in. All right, let's talk about fraud because we all like to talk about fraud, right? So fun. All right, if you commit fraud, you and your family may be subject to any of the following penalties, which we have discussed before, but let's go over them again. Eviction, termination of assistance, repayment of rent that you should have paid had you reported your income correctly, prohibited from receiving future rental assistance for a period of up to 10 years, and prosecution by the local, state, or federal prosecutor, which may result in you being fined up to $10,000 and or serving time in jail. All right, so protect yourself by following HUD reporting requirements. When completing applications and reexaminations, you must include all sources of income you or any member of your household receives. If you have any questions on whether money received should be counted as income or how your rent is determined, ask your PHA. Pick up that phone, call us. We will answer your questions. When changes occur in your household income, contact your PHA immediately to determine if this will affect your rental assistance. All right, so what do I do if the EIV information is incorrect? Well, sometimes the source of EIV information may make an error when submitting or reporting information about you. If you do not agree with the EIV information, let your PHA know. And if necessary, your PHA will contact the source of information directly and will verify or dispute the income information. Below are the procedures you and the PHA should follow regarding incorrect EIV information. Go ahead and read all those. I'm not going to read them, so please read them at your convenience and be sure to sign it. Remember, you want to sign things that you have read. Let's move on down to where it says, where can I obtain more information on EIV and the income verification process? If you look at that section, there is a web address, a link. It may be hard to read it on the screen, but on your paper it should read www.hud.gov/offices/ph/programs/ph/RHIP/UIV.CFM. I have my glasses on, but I feel like I may have maybe misread that. I am human, I can make a mistake. If you need that web address, call us. We will direct you to that web address or even provide you with a phone number. So the information in this guide pertains to applicants and participants of the following HUD and PIH rental assistance programs. They're listed below. Then please sign, head of household, please sign this, return this to our office. Complete, that means you have read it in its entirety and you understand. If not, again, please give us a call and we will answer your questions. Deconcentration information. The Housing Choice Voucher Program was designed to allow the tenant the opportunity to choose their own housing and to be evenly spread throughout the area instead of being concentrated into one area. The purpose of deconcentration is to encourage people to live in areas with a higher than average poverty rate. The expectation is that in blending the neighborhoods with different income families, we are helping to reduce poverty and promote equality. Feel free to go ahead and read this on your own. And then also on the following page, these two that I'm giving you now are HUD required. I'm not going to go over it, but please read it on your own. Moving forward in your packet, you will come to the Notice of Occupancy Rights under the Violence Against Women Act. This is 5 pages long. Not going to read it all to you. Please read it on your own time. I'm just going to read the first paragraph. It's to all tenants and applicants. The Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, provides protections for victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. VAWA protections are not only available to women, but are available equally to all individuals regardless of sex, gender identity, or sexual orientation. HUD is the federal agency that oversees that the Fayetteville Housing Authority is in compliance with VAWA. This notice explains your rights under VAWA. A HUD-approved certification form is attached to this notice. You can fill out this form to show that you are or have been a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, and that you wish to use your rights under VAWA. So, this notice is the one that explains your rights under VAWA. And then if you move on to the next one, this is the certification. So where it says the certification form is attached, and if you'd like to use it, saying that you've been a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, or sexual assault or stalking, this is the one that you'll fill out. It's a front and back. So this is the one that you'll need to fill out. Now, going back to the notice, at the bottom, you see the HUD form number is 5380. Now look at the bottom of your certification. If you choose to use it, that's a HUD form 5382. Now, what we require from you is this form here to be signed by every adult member of the household, and it just basically states that I acknowledge that I am in receipt of the two forms, the 5380 and the 5382. So this is just like, hey, I received it and I am certifying that I received it. So sign it and return it to our office. PHA informal review and hearing requirements. There are two procedures. There's one for applicants and there's one for participants. We will go through this in its entirety. All right, so let's start with procedures on informal reviews for applicants. Number one, informal reviews shall be conducted by any person or persons designated by the PHA who is not the one who made or approved the decision under review or a subordinate of such person. 2, applicant can present objections orally or in writing. 3, PHA informs the applicant in writing of final decision and reasons for it. When can a review be requested? The PHA will only offer an informal review to applicant for who assistance is being denied. Denial of assistance includes denying listing on the PHA waiting list, denying or withdrawing a voucher, refusing to enter into a HAP contract or approve a lease, refusing to process or provide assistance under portability procedures, denial of assistance based on unfavorable history that may be the result of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. When is a review not required? Discretionary administrative determinations by the PHA, general policy issues or class grievances, a determination of the family unit size under the PHA's subsidy standards, a PHA determination not to approve an extension or suspension of a voucher term, a PHA determination not to grant approval of tenancy, a PHA determination that the unit is not in compliance with the HQS, a PHA determination that the unit is not in accordance with the HQS due to family size or composition. Scheduling an informal review. Remember, this is for applicants. A request for an informal review must be made in writing and delivered to the PHA either in person or by first-class mail by the end of the business day, no later than 10 business days from the date of the PHA's denial of assistance. The PHA must schedule and send written notice of the informal review within 10 business days of the family's request. All right, now procedures on informal hearings for participants. 1, informal hearings must be conducted by any person or persons designated by the PHA who was not the one who made or approved the decision under the review or a subordinate of such person. 2, family can have at its own expense a lawyer or someone else represent them at the hearing. However, if the family is to be represented by a lawyer at the informal hearing, the PHA must be notified at least 2 business days prior to the hearing. When the family's legal counsel is present at the informal hearing, failure by the family to notify the PHA that they will be represented by the legal counsel may result in the PHA rescheduling the hearing to a time when the PHA's legal counsel can also be present. 3, the hearing officer is responsible to manage the order of business and to ensure that hearings are conducted in a professional and business-like manner. Attendees are expected to comply with all hearing procedures established by the hearing officer and guidelines for conduct. 4, both sides shall present their evidence and may question witnesses, but are not governed by the court rules over admissibility of evidence. 5, person who conducted hearing must issue a written decision within 15 business days after the hearing is conducted and give the reasons for it, which are based only on facts presented at the hearing. When can an informal hearing be requested? A determination of the family's annual or adjusted income and the use of such income to compute the housing assistance payment. A determination of the appropriate utility allowance, if any, for tenant-paid utilities from the PHA utility allowance schedule. A determination of the family unit size under the PHA's subsidy standards. A determination to terminate assistance for a participant family because of the family's actions or failure to act. A determination to terminate assistance because a participant has been absent from the assisted unit for longer than the maximum period permitted under the PHA policy and HUD rules. When is an informal hearing not required for the participants? Discretionary administrative determinations by the PHA, general policy issues or class grievances, establishment of the PHA schedule of utility allowances for families in the program, a PHA determination not to approve a unit or tenancy, a PHA determination that a unit selected by the participant is not in compliance with the HQS, a PHA determination that the unit is not in accordance with HQS because of family size, a determination by the PHA to exercise or not to exercise any right or remedy against an owner under the HAP contract, a PHA determination not to approve an extension or a suspension of a voucher term. Scheduling an informal hearing. A request for an informal hearing must be made in writing and delivered to the PHA either in person or by first-class mail by the end of the business day, no later than 10 business days from the date of the PHA's decision or notice to terminate assistance. The PHA must schedule and send written notice of the informal hearing to the family within 10 business days of the family's request. This section of your briefing packet is just a summary of housing quality standards. So if you remember back at the very beginning of the briefing, we discussed the housing quality standards and inspections. I discussed with you when you find a unit, an inspection will have to be scheduled and we will determine if the unit meets housing quality standards. So our inspectors will have a checklist. Obviously, it's going to be a little more detailed than this, but they'll have a checklist, and when they go out to that unit, they're checking off to make sure everything's passing. So there will be a likelihood where something might fail, and in that case, we'll bring it to the landlord's attention to see if they can get it fixed so that we can move you in. But in the likelihood that the landlord refuses to fix it, we cannot pass that inspection. Therefore, you will have to go and basically start your search over again. So this is where we provide you the cheat sheet where you can use this for your own benefit. When you're finding a unit, you can take this with you and just kind of look it over. I'm not asking you to do a thorough inspection because that's what our inspectors are there for, but just take it with you. Make sure it's meeting some of these housing quality standards. Now, if you have questions about certain things that are questionable, if you're out there and you're just like, I just don't know about this, or you need clarification, we do have inspectors in our office. I can encourage you to call our inspector. We have a couple on hand who have been trained and certified for housing quality standards, and they would be more than happy to answer your questions. If no one's available, definitely a specialist, reach out to them. They can offer more insight as well. Included in your briefing packet, there should be 4 pamphlets, and they are booklet size. So let's grab those, take just a real quick look at them, because they will be on this page here that you see on your screen to where you acknowledge that you are in receipt of them. So I just want to quickly run over it. The first one is Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. It's basically if you plan on buying or renting a home built before 1978, it's going to talk about the possibility of lead in your home, what to look for. So please take a look at that. The second pamphlet is A Good Place to Live. This goes over the housing quality standards. It's a more detailed list for each room in the unit, what is required. Then the third pamphlet is Are You a Victim of Housing Discrimination? Fair housing is your right, and if you feel you have been denied your housing rights, you may have experienced unlawful discrimination. Please take a look at that as well. And then last but not least, the fourth pamphlet is Fair Housing, Equal Opportunity for All. It just goes over fair housing, what it is, what your protections are, and then if you feel that your rights have been violated, it tells you what to do. So those are the 4 pamphlets. Now moving on to the page you see on your screen. During the briefing today, the Fayetteville Housing Authority will provide you with the following documents, and they are listed. We've gone through all of these. As of now, we've discussed them all. So what you need to do is just acknowledge that you are in receipt of all the above listed documents. Every household member above the age of 18 is required to sign this. Please go ahead and sign it and return it to our office. Another thing we offer for you in this briefing packet is this list of landlords in Washington County that accept the Section 8 vouchers. It is your obligation to contact the landlord at the phone numbers listed below to determine if there are any vacant units in the size you need and just to make sure they accept our vouchers. Placement on this list does not guarantee a landlord will work with our program or will accept you as a tenant. And you do not have to rent only from this list. You are more than welcome to look outside of this list. Now we are nearing the end of this briefing, and in this portion of the packet, I will probably tell you it's one of the most important parts. It is the request for tenancy approval, followed by the letter to the landlord, and then the addendum. So once you find a unit which you would like to lease up, you take this portion to the landlord or the property owner, and they will fill it out. From there, we will find the proposed rent along with utilities and appliances, and then the housing authority can calculate the total tenant payment and make sure that it is rent reasonable. I do want to draw your attention on the second page of this request for tenancy approval. Down at the bottom on the right-hand side, please go ahead and grab that pin that I told you to grab at the very beginning of this briefing. I want you to go ahead where it says print or type name of household head. This is where I want the household head to print your name, and then also a signature down below, followed by your present address, telephone number, and the date. It is very important that you just go ahead, sign this portion, get it out of the way. I will tell you what would happen is if you turn this in to the landlord and it is not signed and filled out, what they would probably end up doing is filling out their portion and then just submitting it directly to the Fayetteville Housing Authority. If that happens and that portion is not signed by you, it is considered null and void. So this is where we just say, just go ahead, fill it out, get it over with. So continuing on with the request for tenancy approval, the landlord will fill this portion out along with this portion. Here is the letter, which I was telling you about. So this is just what we require, what we need from the landlord. And here is the tenancy addendum that has to be attached with that request for tenancy approval. Make sure all of this goes to the landlord. I will tell you more times than not, what typically happens is we get the request for tenancy approval and it does not have the tenancy addendum with it. So again, why do I say this is the most important part? Because things can be null and void if it is not done correctly. So we need that tenancy approval signed, and then attached with it is the addendum. This concludes the briefing for the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call our office and one of our housing specialists would be happy to assist you. The number here is 479-521-3850. And from everyone here at the Fayetteville Housing Authority, have a great day.